here we go. It is the Bowlsby Pod, the four that added after the Texas-Oklahoma announcement in the SEC. We start with BYU. What a great story that Kalani Sitake just mentioned, the turnaround. BYU, unbeaten, having a heck of a run, and Paul Catalina, a fun story with the Cougars and what they've seen. They're not flashy, but that's kind of like a lot of teams in the Big 12. Iowa State's not flashy, but they keep winning.
Yeah, they do. They keep winning and winning and winning, and it's been absolutely fantastic for BYU. They're not they're not going to beat you with a ton of huge athleticism. They don't have the studs that Colorado has or maybe like the running backs that Kansas State has, but they're just collectively playing together really well. Jake Retzlaff has been just a huge improvement from what their quarterback play has been over the last couple of years, and he was even part of that. They didn't even know he was going to be the quarterback until essentially the last day before they had to say, here's the starter. We thought it was probably going to be Gary Bohannon. A lot of people around BYU told us probably going to be Gary Bohannon, and it's Jake Retzlaff. That's worked out fantastic for them. They're already bowl eligible. They're 6-0, and right now they got a 22% chance of being in the conference title game. They're legit. They're a tough out for anybody. I don't think they're going undefeated. I don't think many people in the country will, but I do think that they're going to wind up with 9 or 10 wins, and we're going to go, wow, what a turnaround.
And this week on Friday night, Craig, they host Oklahoma State in Provo.
Yeah, I mean, they dispatched Arizona relatively easily. I don't think Arizona played a very good game, but I think a lot of that had to do with BYU, just making life hell for Noah Fafita with that really good defense of Jay Hills, and they have now started to perhaps scrounge together more of a running game. L.J. Martin coming back and healthy. Texas guy, I think, is a good sign. He had a productive day the other day, whereas they've been able to throw it around and be successful. I do think having more of a running game to lean on should be immensely beneficial if that's the direction that it's going. But Retzlaff, when he's had to throw the ball, has been really effective. Turnovers here and there, but I think he's protected the football pretty well of late, and overall has done just a really sharp, good job of handling the offense and playing complementary football, and really just the team as a whole, the knack for the big play, especially defensively, creating turnovers. It's a game changer for a football team to be able to go and rip the ball away the way that they've been able to do that. So, that Arizona game was a close game about halfway through, even though it didn't feel necessarily like you were watching an upset in progress, but it was at least close enough. You're like, well, you got to hit a pass to McMillan here. It's 14-14, something like that. But by the end of the game, it was very clear who the better team was, and that was BYU. So they're looking sharp. They should be 7-0 after this weekend. You got Oklahoma State at night in Provo on a Friday. So that should be all BYU in terms of atmosphere, especially with where Oklahoma State's coming from right now. They're in a world of hurt, so I think the Cougars should be 7-0, should be knocking on the door of the top 10.
Cincinnati is 4-2. They're 2-1 in the conference. They're hanging around. Coach Satterfield's done a great job with them. They're at home. They play bright and early on Saturday against Arizona State. These are two of the more surprising teams. BYU's in that conversation too. But Cincinnati and Arizona State, both are grinders, play hard, surprises, and I'm happy for Scott Satterfield. And then, of course, obviously we know about Kenny Dillingham, but we're talking Cincinnati. Paul?
If you had told me Cincy and Arizona State was going to be one of the better games in the Big 12 at any point, I'd have been like, what are you talking about? Like, what kind of crystal ball do you have? Like, how much film do you watch? Do you need to go outside maybe and do something else with your life? But yeah, it is. And Sorsby's been good. They've lost games close when they have lost. So they lost to Pitt and Tech by a combined, I think, 5 points, something like that, 6 points. Yeah. So they're not. This is not a team that's far out from also being the shock of the conference. And good luck to them. I mean, this is what everybody says is great about the SEC, right? That somebody can come up having a great season. It's also what's great about the Big 12 is that, there's constant flow and churn of who the teams are at the top. It's not going to get boring. So this is what we wanted. This is what we're getting, and we're getting it a lot faster than I think we thought we would.
Yeah, I mean, Cincinnati's been a really good story, as you mentioned. I don't know how good they really are. Like, that game last week, that was a big one over UCF, but it was also a very ugly game in a lot of ways. But they went down to Orlando and got a win, and they're 4-2, and they have a great argument to be 5-1. That Pitt game, they had no business losing that game, and the Texas Tech game, I mean, that could have gone either way, but they definitely had a chance to send it to overtime, and they missed a long field goal. So, yeah, they're right there in the mix, and I think you have to be encouraged by that. Definitely some things that still need to be continuously worked on and improved, but that was big to go down to O-Town and beat a former American compadre there in the Knights. And you're knocking on the door now of bowl eligibility, which I think based off of where you were sitting at this time and just at the end of last year, that's a massive step forward for you. This game right here I think is a toss-up. It's at Cincinnati. I don't know how much of an advantage that gives them other than the typical home field advantage, but this is a toss-up in my mind. I think I lean Arizona State a little bit, but to me, this really is a coin flip. So
two great running backs, right?
Yeah.
Scatterboo and then Kiner.
Yeah, two really good running backs. Kiner came back last week after getting dinged against Texas Tech and missing most of that game, and he had like 80-something yards, so not one of his better performances, but so long as he's healthy, that's a great sign. Sorsby's, really electric. They hit big plays in the passing game, so this ought to be fun. These two teams going at it, but definitely a coin flip type of a game, and whoever wins this is sitting really, really nice and right there on the verge of bowl eligibility. But I would think at this point, both teams should figure to be in the postseason.
Arizona will become bowl eligible with a win, and then Cincinnati would be a game away. Arizona State. Now, Houston, they were able to sit back, relax, and kind of, enjoy themselves after their win the week before, and here they are. They're playing at Kansas. And as Joseph Duarte tweeted earlier in the week, you look at the end of Houston's schedule, and there's some games that you were like, man, Kansas might be like 5-1 or whatever by then. It's still a dangerous game. Nothing's a gimme, but Houston is not a gimme. And we have said that a couple of times. Shame on us for doing that because they will fight scratch and claw with you. Houston, Paul Catalina, has been, they're not perfect by any means. They're 2-4.
Zion Chris is changes things, for their offense, although Donovan Smith came in and played well when he had to last week against TCU. So, I think that Zion Chris changes things quite a bit for them. He's really, really exciting and talented. And if they can, muddy the water like they did against teams like TCU, this may not be a team that lives in the basement. They still have a lot of work to do, but that was a huge confidence win for them, the last time they played. So let's see what happens the rest of the way. But yeah, I'm confident that they're going to be a tougher out than they were maybe earlier in the season, but still not optimistic that they're just going to turn it all around.
Well, they have a really good defense, and that's going to keep them in a lot of games like you saw with Iowa State, where by the end the scoreboard didn't look all that close, but that was a pretty close game, certainly more close for comfort than a lot of Cyclone fans would have wanted. Now, they have been an easy team to run over if you're Cincinnati, who just absolutely obliterated them a few weeks back. So they've had their very close contest, nearly beaten in Oklahoma, playing Iowa State tough, but then also getting absolutely demolished by Cincinnati. So to turn around and find yourself now at this week where you've had a chance to catch your breath and you got a historic win over TCU, their confidence is probably as high as ever. They still have some lows on offense, quarterback change or not. I mean, Zion Chris does give you something a little bit different, some different type of energy than what you got from Donovan Smith, although Donovan Smith's been admirable in his cleanup efforts or having to come in like in the other week when Chris got hurt. That was a good look for Donovan Smith. So it's good to know you got a couple of guys, even if neither one is great per se. But I think you have to feel really pleased with where you are, not necessarily record-wise, but the fact you beat TCU. That's a big win for that program in the Big 12. And I don't think you came into this year with illusions of we're going to go bowling in year one and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. So I think it's just a week by week, like what can you stack? And you stacked a pretty huge win on that win over Rice from earlier to just give you a little bit of something. And let's see how they're able to carry that with the time off, the rest up, and the time to really focus in on Chris as your QB1 and pair that with a couple good weapons on offense and a pretty good defense, and let's see where it takes you. But this game to me is another toss-up type of game. I do lean Kansas, but I could see Houston going there and making life hell for the Jayhawks.
All right, so Houston, after that win against TCU, which was a horrible loss for TCU because they're like, who are they right now? So we have now gone through BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and a team that is in a free fall. Gus Malzahn, the Knights of UCF, and, man, high expectations. That great running game. They are the number one ranked team when it comes to rushing yards per game. And now they go into the belly of the beast in Iowa State in Ames in a game that's a night game on FS1 coming up on Saturday night. What's going on with UCF?
Yeah, well, they're not very efficient on defense. They've made a change of quarterback. Ja'Curry Brown played last week. KJ Jefferson has not worked out. So we'll see what Ja'Curry Brown can bring them. But it's been unfortunate. Like, all the good things we thought about going into UCF, especially after the TCU win, was holy cow. And then they followed that up with 3 consecutive losses and are not playing with a lot of confidence right now. So, yeah, I don't know what to think of them now any given week. It's, they're 3-3, so it's a toss-up whether, they're going to be effective or not each week. They don't seem all that much different to me than last year right now as far as prospects for going into any given game.
Big problem is KJ Jefferson stinks, and what we saw at the very beginning of the year was not a blip in him getting more comfortable like you thought it might be the week after that, and maybe him settling into a groove. It was just foreshadowing for what was to come. They can run the ball pretty effectively, but they can't do much else besides that. They're not great defensively. They're just kind of a mess, and it's not what you pictured the ideal scenario to be when you had all these running backs and this familiarity at quarterback, and this feeling of, Gus has had players like this before. This ought to be, just slide right in. That's not been the case at all. So 3 straight losses, probably going to be 4. I don't see them going up to Ames and throwing it around to get a win. I don't see them rolling up there and running the ball to get a win against a great Iowa State defense. So the heat's rising on Gus Malzahn. He's not on Dave Aranda's level. Nobody is. But I think he's right there with Neil Brown in terms of, like, the next coaches you start to look at and be like, who could be next? Who could be turning up the heat? I think Malzahn's a guy who a lot of UCF fans are kind of out on at this point. They've seen enough, and they don't like the direction it's heading. Now, I don't know how it feels like in the actual university meeting rooms that matter the most, but certainly he's got his work cut out for him. They're not performing up to expectations. And last year was a rough year. This year's turned into a rough year. There's not really signs it's going to get any better because you're not going to miraculously, the only way it can really get better is Ja'Curry Brown comes in and becomes a really good player for you. He's shown flashes of being better than Jefferson. I don't know how good he's going to be 6 weeks straight for you, but maybe he gives you a little something. But, yeah, they can run the ball really well, and they don't do a whole lot else outside of that all that well. Don't defend the pass. It's just they don't throw. It's just it's kind of a mess, like I said. And so I don't know what direction they're taking, but I don't think it's going to turn for the better this weekend. And you know who they play after going to Ames? They play BYU. So they've got a situation here where they're looking at maybe 4 or 5 straight losses, potentially, or a couple of big wins and turn this whole attitude around surrounding Malzahn, but they have their work cut out for them.
All right, Paul, you've made your comments. BYU, the best. Of all the pods, when you put them together, we need to start this next week or look at it tomorrow. Who has the best pod? When you have Iowa State, K-State in 1, West Virginia's 500, and then KU's a huge disappointment. You have Texas Tech in the South pod, but Oklahoma State, TCU, and Baylor are not good.
Well, it's not that one.
It's
in
not
the
that
four
one,
corners,
no.
You have Utah, who's been a disappointment, regardless of what happens with their attrition and injuries. Colorado's been okay. Arizona,
I think you've got a split between the Bowlesby pod to the north because Bowlesby has BYU and Cincinnati in it, and the north has Iowa State and Kansas State in it.
And Iowa State and Kansas State, if you look at the records, they're right there 1-4 or 2-4 based on the records. BYU, Iowa State, Texas Tech all lead the way at 3-0.